They called her the heavy burden, in the shimmering gravity-defying spires of the Aethelgard Empire. Weight was the ultimate sin. The Aethelgard were a species of bird-like fragility, tall, hollow-boned, and obsessed with an aesthetic of weightlessness. To be heavy was to be grounded, and to be grounded was to be worthless. Princess Elara knew this better than anyone. She was a throwback, a genetic anomaly, in a royal line that prided itself on floating on the wind. Her bones were dense, her skin held warmth, and her body was curved and substantial. In the eyes of her father, King Vorian, she was a walking embarrassment, a statue made of lead in a world of glass. So, when the diplomatic treaty with the humans required a cultural exchange, King Vorian saw an opportunity to make a joke that the entire galaxy would laugh at. He wouldn't send a diplomat. He wouldn't send a scientist. He would send Elara. Let the humans have her. Vorian had laughed, his voice thin and reedy like a flute. They are a brutish, heavy species. Perhaps they will not notice that she is a monster, or perhaps they will eat her. The court had tittered, a sound like breaking ice. Elara had said nothing. She had simply packed her few belongings, mostly heavy books that her sisters couldn't lift, and boarded the transport ship. She was being mailed across the stars like spoiled cargo. But what King Vorian didn't understand, what empires built on vanity never understand, is that gravity has a purpose. It keeps you from drifting away when the storm comes. And Elara was heading toward a storm she couldn't predict, in the form of a human named Ronin. Before we discover the miracle that was waiting for Elara, take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring you more incredible stories from the frontier. And a quick question for you guys. Do you think true strength comes from perfection or from endurance? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. The transport ship touched down on the colony world of Terra Nova. It didn't land gracefully. It thudded, settling into the mud of the agricultural sector. The airlock hissed open, and the Aethelgard entourage glided out first. They were tall, impossibly thin, wearing floating silks that made them look like clouds. They sneered at the mud. They sneered at the humidity. And then Elara stepped out. She walked with her head down, her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself smaller. She wore a cloak meant to hide her shape. But the way she moved, with weight, with impact, gave her away. Waiting for them was not a general or a politician. It was a man in a flannel shirt with flour on his boots and a scar running down his left cheek. He leaned against an old truck, chewing on a stalk of wheat. This was Ronin, the Aethelgard ambassador. A wisp of a man named Silas floated forward. "We present the Lady Elara," Silas said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "Oh, a substantial gift from King Vorian. We trust your colony has reinforced flooring?" The Aethelgard guard snickered. Elara closed her eyes, waiting for the human to laugh. Humans were known to be crude after all. Ronin didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He pushed off the truck and walked toward them. He moved with a heavy, predatory grace that silenced the guards instantly. He walked right past the ambassador, ignoring him completely, and stopped in front of Elara. He towered over the Aethelgard, not in height, but in presence. He looked at Elara, not at her cloak, but at her eyes. "Long trip," Ronin said. His voice was a deep rumble, like thunder in a canyon. "You must be hungry." Elara blinked, startled. I do not require much sustenance. I am accustomed to fasting." It was a lie she had told for 20 years. Ronin frowned. "That wasn't the question. I asked if you were hungry. My grandmother used to say, a traveler who isn't fed is a traveler who isn't welcomed." He extended a hand. It was large, calloused, and rough. A working man's hand. "I'm Ronin. I run the bakery and the hydroponics down in the valley. Welcome to Terra Nova." Elara hesitated. In her culture, touching was rare. Bodies were considered too fragile, but she reached out. When her hand met his, she expected him to flinch at the weight of her grip, at the solidity of her flesh. Instead, his fingers closed around hers, warm and firm. He didn't pull away. He anchored her. "My truck's over here," Ronin said, taking her bag from her other hand. The bag contained 20 crystalline data tablets. It was incredibly heavy. An Aethelgard guard would have collapsed under it. Ronin swung it over his shoulder as if it were filled with feathers. "Let's get you home." Home. The word hung in the air, foreign and terrifying. The residence Ronin had prepared was not a cell, and it was not a sterile guest suite. It was a cottage near the edge of the wheat fields. It had thick wooden beams, stone floors, and furniture that looked like it could survive a bomb blast. For the first time in her life, Elara sat on a chair without fearing it would snap under her. The first week was a dance of avoidance. Elara tried to stay invisible. She expected Ronin to come by with a list of demands, or to parade her around the colony as a curiosity. The heavy princess the joke, but Ronin left her alone mostly. He dropped off boxes of food. Real food! Fresh bread that steamed in the cold morning air. Stews thick with root vegetables. Fruits that burst with juice. On the fourth day, Elara found him in the hydroponics bay. He was wrestling with a stuck valve on the irrigation system. A wrench the size of her arm was slipping in his grip. "You're applying torque at the wrong angle," Elara said softly from the doorway. Ronin looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yeah? You know plumbing, princess?" "I studied hydraulic engineering," she said, stepping forward. "My father, he didn't allow me to attend the royal balls. I spent my time in the library and the maintenance shafts." She didn't tell him the rest. That she hid in the shafts because the engineers were the only ones who didn't mock her size, mostly because they were too busy fixing the fragile technology the Aethelgard relied on. "Be my guest," Ronin said, stepping back and offering her the wrench. Elara took it. It was heavy, wonderfully heavy. She felt the density of the metal and understood it. She knelt, her knees hitting the metal grating with a solid thud. She didn't have to be delicate here. She applied her weight, leaning into the lever. Her body, the very thing she had been shamed for, became a fulcrum of power. With a groan of metal, the valve turned. Steam hissed, and the pressure normalized. She stood up, terrified she had broken something else. She looked at Ronin, expecting him to make a comment about her weight being useful for brute force. Ronin was staring at the pressure gauge, nodding slowly. "Good eye," he said. Then he looked at her. "And good leverage. Most of the guys here try to muscle that with their arms. You used your center of gravity. That's smart." He didn't call her heavy, he called her smart. "I can help you recalibrate the rest," Elara heard herself say. "The flow ratios are off by 4%. Ronin smiled, and it transformed his face. It wasn't a polite, diplomatic smile. It was a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You're hired. Pay is in cinnamon rolls. That acceptable?" Elara felt a strange warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the steam. "Acceptable," she whispered. Weeks turned into months. The joke of the Aethelgard Empire was becoming the backbone of Terra Nova's agricultural grid. Elara redesigned the water filtration system. She optimized the heat shields. She worked alongside Ronin, her hands stained with grease and soil. But the trauma of a lifetime doesn't vanish because of a few fixed valves. One evening, during a colony gathering, a visiting merchant from a neighboring system made a comment. He was drunk, and he laughed when he saw Elara eating a piece of cake. "Look at that," the merchant slurred. "I heard the Aethelgard sent their trash here, but I didn't know they sent the whole landfill." The room went quiet. Elara froze. The fork trembled in her hand. The shame crashed over her, a familiar suffocating wave. She wasn't the engineer. She wasn't the partner. She was just the fat girl again. She started to stand, to run, to hide, but a hand landed on her shoulder. Heavy warm, anchoring. Ronin didn't look at Elara. He looked at the merchant. He didn't shout. He didn't draw a weapon. He just walked over to the merchant's table, picked up the man's whiskey bottle, and poured it slowly onto the floor. "You're done," Ronin said. His voice was low, vibrating through the room. "Get out of my hall!" "I'm just saying what everyone thinks," the merchant sputtered. "She's an unnatural..." Ronin leaned in close. "You see a joke," Ronin said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I see the woman who fixed the heat grid, so your children don't freeze at night. I see the mine that doubled our crop yield. You're looking at royalty, pal, and you're not fit to breathe the same air." He turned to Elara. "Finish your cake, Elara. It's good." The merchant fled. The room returned to normal conversation, but the air had changed. Elara looked up at Ronin, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "Why?" she asked later, when they were walking back to her cottage under the dual moons. "Why defend me? I am unnatural. My own father said so." Ronin stopped. He turned her to face him. "Your father is an idiot who thinks a kite is better than a mountain." "Elara, look at me." She looked. "You take up space," Ronin said intensely. "Good. You should take up space. You have gravity. You have substance. When you walk into a room, the energy shifts. That's not a defect. That's power. I've spent my whole life on frontier worlds, fighting wind and vacuum and cold. You know what saves us? Things that are solid, things that don't break. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're not a joke to me. You're the most real thing I've ever met. Elara let out a sob she had been holding for 20 years, and Ronin pulled her into a hug. He wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time, she didn't try to make herself feel lighter. She pressed her weight against him, and he held her, unyielding as the earth itself. The peace of Terra Nova was shattered 3 months later. It wasn't an invasion, it was something worse. The Aethelgard sun, a volatile blue star, flared. The radiation storm was sweeping across the sector, hitting the colony worlds. The Aethelgard ships in orbit were in panic. Their technology was advanced, but their hulls were built for elegance, not endurance. They were fragile. King Vorian's flagship, the Gilded Wing, was in the sector for an inspection. When the ion storm hit, the flagship's stabilizers failed. The ship was dead in the water, drifting toward Terra Nova's gravity well, burning up in the atmosphere. The colony's comms lit up with a distress signal. "This is King Vorian," the voice screamed, stripped of all its arrogance. "Our structural integrity is failing. The resonance vibrations are shattering our bones. We cannot withstand the G-force to repair the core. Help us!" Ronin was in the command center, looking at the schematics. "We can't send a shuttle up there," he said grimly. "The turbulence would tear it apart. They need to manually reset their resonance core from the inside." "We can't," the king wept over the comms. "The vibration, it's too strong. Any Aethelgard who enters the core chamber is shaken to death instantly. Our bones, they are too hollow." Elara stood by the console. She looked at the schematic of her father's ship. She knew that engine. She had studied it in secret when she was 12. "I can do it," she said. Ronin whipped around. "No, Elara, the G-force in that chamber will be crushing. It's vibrating at a frequency that liquefies soft tissue." "It liquefies Aethelgard tissue," Elara corrected him, her voice steady. "Because they are light, they are air. But I am not air, Ronin. I am earth, I am heavy. My bone density is 3 times theirs. My muscle mass can absorb the resonance." "It could kill you," Ronin said, grabbing her arm. His eyes were wide with fear. "I just found you. I'm not losing you to him." "You won't lose me," she said, placing her hand over his. "But if I don't do this, 5,000 people die, including the father who hated me. I have to show him, Ronin. I have to show him what his burden can do." Ronin looked at her, searching for hesitation. He found none. He nodded once. "Then I'm flying the shuttle. If you're going into the fire, I'm driving the bus." The flight up was a nightmare. The shuttle rattled like a tin can, but Ronin held it steady, docking with the spinning, burning flagship. When the airlock opened, the chaos inside was absolute. Aethelgard nobles lay on the floor, too weak to stand against the shuddering of the ship. Crystal vases shattered. The delicate, spindly crew members were gasping, their hollow bones fracturing from the sheer vibration of the failing engine. King Vorian was slumped on his throne, bleeding from his nose. When he saw Elara enter, wearing a heavy human flight suit, looking like a Valkyrie of war, his eyes bulged. "You," he wheezed, the monster. Elara didn't spare him a glance. "Ronin, get them to the escape pods. I'm going to the core." "Elara," Vorian shouted. "You can't, it will crush you." She turned back, just for a second. "Watch me." She ran toward the engine room. The air was thick, screaming with sonic pressure. A normal Aethelgard would have disintegrated, but Elara put her head down and charged. She felt the vibration rattle her teeth, but her dense, heavy bones held firm. Her shameful weight kept her planted on the deck plates, while everything else was thrown around. She reached the core. The manual override wheel was massive. It required hundreds of pounds of torque. She grabbed it. The heat seared her gloves. The vibration tried to shake her apart. She gritted her teeth, thinking of every insult, every sneer, every time she was told to take up less space. "You want me to disappear?" she thought. "I will not disappear. I am the anchor," she screamed, a primal sound of effort, and threw her entire body weight against the wheel. Her muscles strained, her heavy frame acting as a shock absorber for the dying ship. With a thunderous clang, the core reset. The vibration stopped, the ship stabilized. Elara slumped against the wheel, gasping, alive. An hour later, in the hangar bay, the survivors were gathering. The ship was safe. Terra Nova had sent tugs to stabilize the orbit. King Vorian stood before his daughter. He looked smaller now, frail. Broken Elara stood next to Ronin. She was covered in soot, bruising already forming on her arms, but she stood tall. "You," Vorian whispered. How? The resonance should have killed you. It kills the finest of our lineage. That is your mistake, father, Elara said, her voice echoing in the silent bay. You bred the Aethelgard for vanity. You wanted us to be like clouds, but clouds dissipate in the wind. Our ancestors, the ones who built this empire, they looked like me. They were built to endure. You called me a throwback. I am not a throwback. I am the original design. The realization hit the king like a physical blow. The obesity he had mocked was actually the genetic strength of their species, lost to centuries of aesthetic breeding. He had thrown away the only thing that could save them. Elara, Vorian said, his voice trembling. I see that now. You must return with us. We need your genetics. We need to breed this strength back into the line. You will be a hero. I will give you a palace. Ronin stepped forward. His hand drifted to his belt. He didn't speak, but the threat was clear. Elara looked at her father. Then she looked at the cold, beautiful, empty ship. Finally, she looked at Ronin. She saw the flower on his boots. She saw the scar on his face. She saw the man who had poured out whiskey to defend her honor when she had nothing to offer him but her company. A palace, Elara repeated. A cold room where I am valued only for my blood, where I am a science experiment. She took Ronin's hand. I already have a home, Elara said, and it has gravity. You are refusing your king, Vorian gasped. I am refusing a man who sent his daughter to die as a joke, Elara said coldly. The joke is over. Get off my planet. They say the Aethelgard Empire changed after that. They say they stopped worshipping the sky and started looking at the ground. But that didn't matter to the couple living in the cottage at the edge of the wheat fields. 5 years later, the bakery on Terra Nova was famous, not just for the bread, but for the woman who ran the engineering bay next door. Ronin and Elara sat on their porch, watching the twin suns set. A child played in the grass. A little girl, sturdy and strong, laughing as she tried to lift a pumpkin that was too big for her. She's got your determination, Ronin said, handing Elara a mug of coffee. She has your stubbornness, Elara countered, leaning her head on his shoulder. Elara looked at her hands. They were strong, they were heavy, and they were holding the hand of the man who had seen the miracle when everyone else saw a mistake. She wasn't a princess anymore. She was something better. She was loved. And in a universe full of people trying to float away, she had found the one place where she could finally, truly land. Sometimes, the things the world tells us are our weaknesses are actually our greatest strengths waiting to be discovered. If you enjoyed this story of love and redemption, please like the video and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, what is a flaw you have that you've turned into a strength? We'll see you in the next story.